Welcome back, everybody. Draskyl here. Today, we're doing yet another type of video. Today, we're going to be trying to tackle a multitude of subjects, ranging from itemization to being able to judge what your role is in the game and how you should itemize accordingly. So to start, we're looking at a replay here. This is roughly 3000 MMR, so your legend bracket. And we're going to be looking at primarily the Void Spirit and just kind of talking about the choices that we made through our item progression. Now, this game is relatively long. We're not going to go through the entire replay or anything like that. We're just going to talk Dota theory, okay? So inside of the game, a lot of things can happen that don't match your plan, which is okay. But as long as you stick to the idea that you have of the game or your perception of how the game should be going, then a lot of the time you're going to be better off. So if we start over here and we look at the pregame, we see the basic item build that we're going to be walking to lane with. And we know that we're most likely going to be matching up with Alina. And this lane is not favored for Void at all. So if we go like a little bit forward here, we can see, 4 minutes in, Alina's going to be leading. And then the higher level she gets, the more and more difficult our lane gets. Now, because we're not actually going into the replay right now, we're going to quickly think about what our hero does within this game. Now, Void Spirit is a burst hero. He usually is played either mid or one of the offlane roles, like 3 or 4, but most of the time it's mid. And you are the burst damage initiating hero that is very good at catching. And when we say catch, what we're really saying is you're good at starting fights because you're highly mobile and you offer a stun. And Void Spirit has these things. So what Void Spirit wants to do with his kit is he wants to go in, blow a hero up, and then be able to get out. This is a big thing that I think a lot of people at lower MMR don't quite understand, is that when Void Spirit goes in, you're not fully committing all the time. You're trying to save one of your ultimates to be able to escape, and if that damage isn't enough to kill the guy, then you just have to leave. So with that in mind, we're looking at the enemy team. We see Pudge, we see Elder Titan, we see Terrorblade. All these heroes are relatively tanky. And our heroes on Dire, they don't really burst. Like, we're the only hero on our team who applies his damage very quickly. Tusk adds a little bit on top, which is nice. He has, like, the tag team and the punch. But everybody else just does physical damage. So we have a lot of physical damage against a team with a Terrorblade, a Pudge, and a Titan, which doesn't really feel great. So what do? Right? This is the question that you'd have to ask yourself in the game. Well, what path do I want to choose itemization wise to be able to play? What can I do to make my hero the most impactful? So I think a lot of the times people kind of gloss over things like Sanj Kaya at this bracket as sort of an item that people buy at high MMR, but they don't really understand why. They look at it and they're like, this item seems really good because all these pro level players are buying it, but I don't get it. What's the point? In a game like this where your hero is not capable of getting the burst damage in and getting out easily, having a Sanj and a Kaya in your inventory basically means you can stay in the fight longer. It makes you safer. You're actually getting a good amount of damage on Void Spirit as well because the Kaya provides you spell amplification. And then when you do go in, if you ever get caught by spells, you get the status resist, you get the extra HP, the opportunity more or less to live. So if it were me and I was thinking about itemization, if I buy a Yules and I'm ever using it on myself, it feels bad. And I say it feels bad because Elder Titan can set up out of Yules, you can get hooked out of Yules, you can get glimpsed out of Yules, the Lina can stun you when you hit the ground. If I Yules myself in this game, 4 of the heroes on the enemy team have a way of immediately following it and killing me. I am more or less setting myself up to die by Yulesing myself. Now, you don't have to use it that way, but if we're thinking about items specifically, it doesn't make sense to buy an item that only has one use, and that's aggro Yules. Like, all the time, you're going to be using Yules to kill, and that's the only thing you're going to use it for, and you can't use it for defense. Because all of these heroes can just either pull you out of it, or they hit you when you hit the ground, and then you die. Right? So in my brain, I go, okay, probably not a Yules game. Because it's a one-faceted item, and when I itemize, I really like everything in my inventory to serve multiple purposes, if at all possible. You won't always be able to do this, but it's a way that you could think about it. So for me, I'd go, all right, maybe, Kaya Sanj maybe some armor item or like a Witchblade, a Shiva's, and then a BKB, right? Because I want to be able to cast my spells in the fight, and I want to be able to at least take somewhat of a hit. Now, there's another philosophy behind this sort of itemization where your heroes actually need uptime in the fights to deal damage. Like Razor needs to be in the fight for a long time because he wants a static link. Longer he's linking somebody, the more damage he does, the better he feels. Tusk, being able to get multiple tag teams off is great. He also provides burst. That's fine. Wraith King can last a long time in a fight as well. So we have these heroes that really benefit another person playing next to them that can get hit by some spells and not just die. So this also goes in line with the thinking of buying Euls being kind of bad, because, well, if you get stunned and all you have in your inventory is a Euls, well, then you're just dead, you know? So when I'm looking at this, and I say those things, like, okay, you know, Kaya Sanj, maybe Witchblade, maybe some BKB, maybe a Shiva's. Because I want to be alive, and I want to be able to deal damage. That's my goal. And that's the goal of any Void Spirit player. Some games, Euls is going to be great, but for this one, it's not. So I don't know exactly what order the items come out in, or even what the Void Spirit buys in this game, but we're going to go over it, and we're going to talk about, like, philosophically what the inventory says you should do. So we got boots, nothing too strange here. Just stick, bottle, brown boots, no big deal. And then we're going to wait until we get to the first item. All right, so roughly 12 minutes. Now, 12 minutes, we have bots. So what does bots do for us in the grand scheme of the game? It lets us be pretty mobile. We can be at a lot of fights. We can TP around the map. We can farm fast. We can do all this neat stuff with like side laning and pushing and all this other stuff. Okay, cool. The Boots of Travel are inherently a very greedy item a lot of the time. And you see it on stuff like Puck and Lina, because these heroes, they can deal their damage from ranged, so they're not as heavily committed to having to buy an item for survivability or an item for initiation, because their kit can be cast from far away and they don't have to put themselves in danger. So if I'm looking at this inventory on a Void Spirit, I go, you're making yourself pretty susceptible to just dying because the bots don't give you any survivability. And even though you can just play the minimap, and that's fine. You can play the minimap and play around you not having HP and just avoid the ganks and all this other stuff. And that would probably work in a 3k average game. But as you get higher MMR, these item choices tend to be punished. The team is going to play aggro, they're going to run at you. You know, things are going to happen on the map, and you're not going to be able to attend to everything because you just won't have the resources, or you'll feel scared because you just don't have enough HP or, you know, whatever in the tank. So the travels, I can understand the point of buying the travels, but if I want to play the game, and against Terrorblade, just as a little bit of a reminder to everybody, this hero carries hard. Terrorblade carries very hard. So when you're seeing that hero on the other team, you should always be thinking, I want to play a little bit aggressive at least. I want to take map control away. I want to go fight. I want to make that guy feel as uncomfortable as humanly possible. So if you're thinking that way and you buy bots, it's a lot harder to accomplish that goal, because you feel worse running into the jungle with travels than you would if you had like even a Euls at this point in your inventory, even though we talked about Euls not being the best, but it's just a comparison. If you're going like Sanj Kaya and you only have the Kaya or only have the Sanj at this point, it still probably feels better than this. So travels, they'll help you farm. We'll keep track of like the net worth, and we're always going to be looking at this guy too, because this guy he's kind of the finality of the game. Once Terrorblade gets big enough, it's going to be real hard to take him out, even with things like, you know, Razor and Grim and all this other stuff. So the next item choice we shall see. It is Euls. So we talked about the benefits and the downsides of Euls a little bit already, but this is a setup item for Void Spirit. Most of the time you see this item, it's set up, you go in, you cast it, you use your Aether Remnant, you combo off of it, and you get the kill. And that should leave you enough to be able to get out, which is okay. I would still argue that if you're going to buy travels, and then you're going to buy Yules, you're still extraordinarily squishy. You get hit by a spell with this build, you're going to die, right? This guy glimpses you. Doesn't matter if you Yules, you get pulled out. You Yules yourself, you hit the ground, you get hit by LSA, you're dead. You Yules yourself, you hit the ground, you get hooked, you're dead. You Yules yourself, you get hit by a stomp, you're dead, right? So this item feels very nice to build. And when we talk about feeling, it's like the movement speed, the mana regen, all this stuff. It's nice. It's quality of life. And even the timings are fine, right? It's 18 minutes. He has bots Yules. It's not like the farm is slow. You're basically saying to yourself, you're playing a super specific style of Dota. I'm TPing around, I'm pushing waves, and I'm looking for opportunities to fight. That is what this inventory is saying to me. If this is not how you're playing the game with the inventory, then there is a problem with like coherence between what your thought process is about how you're playing the game and what items you're actually buying. So this says already, like in the time that we looked back here, right? He had the travels, and then he died, 2 times, and then he got the Yules afterwards. So there were obviously some things that happened in the game between 12 and 18 minutes where he died a few times before he finished this. Now, can we say without looking if having this item or building this item would have saved him? We can't. But there is a good chance that having more survivability or not prioritizing travels as a first item and maybe even finishing boots or buying another small item could have theoretically saved us. So a couple more things about what you want to do, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to transition into this screen, and we're going to take just a quick cursory glance at everybody's inventory, and we're going to try to figure out what is what. Okay, so this Wraith King on my team, he goes Dagger, he goes Radiance, he's got, a fair amount of farm, but it's also important for us to know what he did first. Okay, so he goes for the Radiance naked, he has it minute 18. And then we have this build on this guy. And then the Razor's going just straight BKB. Now, when you're building your own inventory, it is very important that you not only know what your teammates are building, but what the enemy team is building also. If there is no communication between the players on your team, you have to look at their inventory. If someone's not telling you what you're buying, you have to click them. These inventories, obviously Wraith King wants to go for a farming item. He's the one in this game, or the safe lane hero. It makes sense that he wants to go for a farming item. I don't want to talk about his Radiance. I just want it to be known that that guy is going Radiance, and your mid player has Travels and Yules. So this is a lineup to me that is saying we're playing slow, even though we have 2 heroes on our team as cores that can be very aggressive. Both of them have itemized in a way that basically says we need time. Because I'm not feeling super confident fighting with this inventory on Void Spirit if my Wraith King has just a naked Radiance. This inventory probably doesn't feel good until, he gets this other item. Like, he even buys a Hyperstone before he gets Dagger. So this guy is not really fight ready until, minute 23. He can still attend fights, and good players are going to find opportunities to fight between the time where they get this Radiance and then, get this Dagger. But if we're relying on this guy to come to fights with just this in his inventory, like, he doesn't even have a wand. Like, you have to look and you have to see this and say, okay, this guy's not coming. So maybe this build actually is okay, right? If we're making a logical connection and saying, okay, well, I'm going to play side lanes, I'm going to have this Yules, and I'm going to push waves, that's great if it works. But so far, we've died, 3 times in 7 minutes. How many of these deaths are because of these items? Don't know. So we're going to look at the next purchase. Now here, it's Point Booster, which leads me to believe that it's probably just going to be a full Ags, which it ends up being that. At some point in the game, against these heroes, Lina, Pudge, Titan, Disruptor, you will probably want to build BKB. But it's very common, on Void Spirit especially, that you get very caught up in the idea of buying this Ags because it's going to prevent spell usage on the enemy team. This, while being true, in practice is very hard to execute because your Pulse does not have infinite AoE. Like, Pudge sits in the back. If he's not, like, throwing hooks and trying to aggro hook, he's sitting in the back. Elder Titan's sitting in the back. And then the Disruptor and the Lina are also sitting in the back. So how are you going to hit all these heroes that are really important to hit with this item? Like, from a functionality standpoint, it seems very difficult to play with Ags in this game because you're going to be forced very, very far into the engagement. We're talking, like, having to use Assimilate, one charge of the ulti, maybe even two, to get to the backline to get those kills. And then when we get them, we're out of gas. We're just out of gas. And when that happens, you die. So when I suggest things like Sanj Kaya, or, you know, the Sanj Kaya into BKB or Shiva's or whatever, it's because in my experience of playing, obviously quite a bit, you're going to run into games where you have to use every bit of mana you have on Void to kill. And in those games, it's usually better to have the Sanj Kaya and the BKB, because then you're not sacrificing yourself to kill heroes that have to die within the fight. Now, he also has a Tusk, and he has a Blink Wraith King, so it's not necessarily all on him. But the idea when you itemize as a core is that you do want to die very, very little, especially as a mid player. And I feel like this inventory at 27 minutes, you know, if we take a glance at what these other guys have, I mean, Elder Titan's got, you know, Echo Medallion. This guy apparently just rushed a heart with 2 bracers. What a Chad. Lina's got BKB and Yules. This guy's got a dagger. And this guy's got Scotty and SNY. So we're looking at this TB's inventory right now, and we're looking at our inventory, and we're going, I can't kill this guy. I cannot kill this guy. So if we can't kill this guy, then we have to ignore him. But the problem is, if we ignore him, we die to him, right? We have no armor. We have no magic immunity. We get caught by a storm, we're dead. We still die to the same stuff. Like, our hero has not scaled in any real meaningful way in terms of survivability. We're like all in damage, get this Ags, you know, try to burst, we're just leaning into that one aspect of the hero, which some games is fine. But in some games, you're not going to be able to just kill that guy. It won't work. You won't have enough damage. This is a game where the cores on Radiant already are basically immune to dying to your combo. TB will not die. This guy with the BKB, this Lina, will not die. This Pudge with a heart, he ain't dying either. I'm not saying that this build is good, but he is not going to die to what you're doing. So if you look at it and you can't gauge, you know, how much damage am I realistically dealing and what's my job in the fight, this is the part where you have to really be like, if I'm going to have the most impact that I can have, what is it that I can do? I can kill the Disruptor. You know, this guy's killable. No HP items. All he has is a dagger. Great. I can maybe kill the Elder Titan with some help. And that's good too. You know, taking the Disruptor and taking out the Elder Titan, these are still very important heroes. There's no Glimpse, there's no Static Storm, there's no Natural Order, you know, get the minus armor, the minus magic armor stuff. You take those heroes out, the fight becomes significantly easier for the other cores. So we're running into, like, this identity crisis with our build. It's like, what do we actually do? We can kill these 2 heroes and that's it. If we had a different inventory, we could maybe have done more in the early game and the mid game, which is another important part of itemizing, is that when you buy the correct things, your game just tends to get easier. It doesn't get harder because you made a choice of an item that makes more sense and has more use and utility than, you know, the build that you might normally go for. And this is why it's such a dangerous trap to fall into when people are just buying the same stuff every game. You see these Void players and they're like, you know, they buy Yules first and all this other stuff. Why can't I? It's not that the Yules is bad inherently. It's that your job isn't the same every game. Like this game, your team needs you to go in, right? If you can't go in, you're not helping the team. Like, this guy wants you to go in. This guy wants you to go in. This guy really wants you to go in. Grimstroke is just on his hands and knees and he's begging you, please go in. And with this inventory, you can't. I mean, you can, but you're probably going to die. And that feels really, really bad. Because he's going to cast Inkswell on you. and you're going to want to be able to push your ultimate and go into the middle of a couple of heroes and stun them and silence them. But you get hit by one stray spell, and you go poof. And that's kind of the downfall of this build, I feel, is that you just don't have the freedom. You don't have the freedom to do that stuff with this inventory. In fact, I'd say most games, if you have like a Grim or some other hero that wants to throw spells onto you, it's usually better to just go for like the tanky hybrid builds and then transition into BKB. Because ultimately, your job is going to be more or less the same in those situations. And I mean, just look at it. I mean, this speaks for itself, right? We were just talking about, you're just going to fall over. Just watch the deaths. We started at roughly, 27 minutes. And then he just dies. And then we go a little bit further and he dies. And he's getting some kills like after the fact. But these deaths stop you from scaling. Like, look at the net worth difference, right? So we go back here. What were we at? Like 27. 2740-ish is when he finished the Ags. He was 12k. So in the course of like, what is it, 7 or 8 minutes? He's farming roughly like 300-ish GPM, which is very low. Like you obviously want to be much higher than that. And here he gets a handful of kills and doesn't die, which is great, obviously. So his net worth gets a little bit of a spike. But he's not necessarily scaling as hard as he could be. Because these fighty type heroes, the best way to scale is to not be dead. Obviously, that's just like, duh. You don't want to die in Dota. But it's very easy to overcommit. And the tankier you are with your build, and having like BKB against heroes like Lina and Pudge and Disruptor, makes it a lot harder for them to finish you if you do overcommit, right? So I don't think that this type of build... Okay, he gets BKB like minute 38. So the BKB finally comes out, and we're looking at the inventories. Now, what's the problem here? What's the problem now that we've pivoted for the BKB minute 38? Dota is a series of butterfly effects. Everything that happens has impact for the entire game. So every time he dies, every time they go for a fight, and something bad happens to him, it delays the timing, and then the other heroes get items in response to the game. Like, obviously, your item progression and the enemy team's item progression matter when you're comparing to each other. So now that he has BKB, who can he kill? Let's look at the inventories. Well, this guy is really tanky now. The Echo, full Blade Mail, Solar, couple Bracers. We can't really... probably not. Okay, so we can't kill this guy either. He's still got his heart. He's got a Force now. This Lina's got her own Kaya Sanj on top of the BKB. Now, her item progression hasn't been super fast either, but the fact remains that Void Spirit's burst potential falls off significantly the later the game goes. It's more... In the late game as Void Spirit, you're more lasting a long time and throwing out multiple rounds of spells than you are just, like, snap killing a hero. And then this guy's got Glimmer, so he's a little bit tricky if we don't have Dust. And then, obviously, this Terrorblade is just... We're never going to kill him without help. So, again, by the time we get to this point, the game is already, if we check the graphs, 38 minutes, that's roughly, like, right here. We have somewhat of an equal game. This is only, what, like 3,000 or 4,000 net worth lead, give or take. Same with the experience. So the game at this point is still even. But I would argue that this BKB, while it may keep you alive, you've kind of already missed your timing. 38 minutes is past Void Spirit's prime. There isn't really, like... There's never a stage in the game past this point where you're going to feel super good about playing Void Spirit, because that's just the nature of the hero. He doesn't have ultra amazing late game scaling. He can stun a lot if you get the level 25 Dissimulate talent, and he can be very mobile and annoying and silence and stuff, but he is no longer in control of how much damage is being dealt to a hero at any given point in time. Without watching the actual replay, we can't tell. Obviously, they lose a fight here, and then it's probably right next to their base, given the dip. Usually when you see stuff like this, it's like we died right outside of our base, or we died at Roche, and then our whole base got taken because nobody had buyback. This is normally what this means. So I'm going to assume that's the case. And again, if we just take a look at everybody's items, like the Wraith King's items are like Okay, he's got an MKB. There's not really any evasion on the enemy team to have to worry about, so it's a little bit weird that he goes MKB, probably for the Terrorblade, if I had to guess, just because of the high armor. But we're definitely not going to do enough damage. That's the problem. We don't do enough damage anymore. The game has gone on for too long. The Terrorblade's inventory is too powerful. He's got Satanic, BKB, SNY, Scotty, all these stats. And we are just no longer capable of killing this guy, right? If we look at the draft versus draft, I believe that Dire should have a pretty good chance to win, just based on heroes. And this guy is the endgame boss. Sometimes in your Dota games, there's going to be an endgame boss, and that just means you have to win before this guy reaches X point. If he reaches X point, well, good luck. It's going to be real hard. And for this game, it's Terrorblade. I believe he gets there, and the Dire team is just unable to deal with the pressure and the damage that he can put out. So they probably just lose based off that. So again, have a plan. Think about when you're on the draft screen and you're looking at the enemy teams and you have like that minute or two before you load in. Some really simple concepts to keep in mind. What does my team need from me? What does my team really want to happen? Do they want me to go in? Do they need me to be tanky? Do they need me to deal a ton of damage? Do they need me to, split push? Do they need me to team fight with them? Like, there's gonna be an obvious answer. If you're playing a hero like Void Spirit, normally you're just going in. That's what you do. You go in. So when you have all these scary spells, build ways to live so that you can justify going in, and then your teammates can play off of you being stronger and not playing sort of like this split pushy Yule style, which again, it could have worked if you had transitioned into an item that was not Ags. But I feel that if you take the time to ask, you'll normally come up with a pretty reasonable thing. So I hope that you guys learned a little bit from this, at least in terms of how I view items. I'm sure there are people who have different concepts about how they like to build their heroes and how they perceive the game. But I found lately that if you look at your own team and you just think about what enables them, even from a core position, like what do they need out of me, you'll typically have a much better time in the game, and your item builds will normally just feel better. So again, thank you guys for hanging out. If you guys want to check me out live, I'm on twitch.tv/Draskyl, same as the YouTube. Hope you guys are all having a nice day, and we'll see you next time.